sure that we have a good email so that you get the flyer, so that we can get you the invite for the meeting. So we're thrilled that Congresswoman Stansbury has decided to come down to Lincoln County and present issues concerning what she's got going. She's born and raised in New Mexico, and Brandon was just saying that she's the first representative solely from New Mexico. No? Did I not get that right? Okay. Okay. Well, then I'm wrong about that. So, yeah, that's a good one. But she's been fighting for the needs and interests of all of us in New Mexico and in Lincoln County. So we appreciate that. And we need to keep her in that position. Going forward, this election, we want to make sure that we do what we can to keep her in this position. I love seeing your updates on Facebook and information that you put out about your activities and the activities or inactivities of Congress. And so with that, Melanie Stansbury.
All right, well, good it just dismantled our federal agencies. And so one of our biggest challenges right now is trying to figure out how to manage getting anything done when half of our agencies are missing people and there's no staffing and there's no funding. And so, at this particular moment, among the biggest issues that we're facing is that the president has moved on from DOGE beginning in January, which I don't think is any accident that it coincided with the release date of the Epstein files. Donald Trump started invading foreign countries. He invaded Venezuela, completely illegal. It violates the Constitution, but for months they have been illegally bombing fishing boats and other boat craft in the Caribbean. Then he started threatening to leave NATO and invade Greenland, and then suddenly out of the blue he invaded Iran in an illegal war, and now can't figure out how to get out of it. And so this wasn't even, a part of what we were thinking we were battling even 4 months ago. And now all of a sudden we're dealing with all of these foreign wars. And they're not just abstractions, because our men and women in the armed services are being deployed overseas to go fight these chaotic and illegal wars. And as of today, as I understand it, the last barrel of oil that left the Strait of Hormuz will arrive in the United States, which means that oil prices and our economy are about to have some real shocks. And I know we're already seeing really out of control prices, and we're seeing gas going sky high, but this is like the beginning of the really big catastrophic economic shock. And so in the midst of all the other chaos that we were dealing with illegal, invasion of cities and deployment of National Guard and harassment of immigrants and all these things that was going on, now suddenly we're fighting a foreign war in a country that nobody thought we were going to, that's costing $27 billion redistricting happen in California. They put it on a ballot measure, it passed. California is now redistricted. They did it in Virginia. It passed. The people said, yes, we want redistricting. It's in the courts right now. And because ultimately the Republicans started it, but the Democrats finished it, I do believe that ultimately last week when the president summoned the Supreme Court justices to have dinner with him and the king in the White House, that there was some sort of collusion in working like that. And they handed down a decision the next day that gutted the ability to basically fight back in the courts against illegal racial gerrymandering. So the implications of that Supreme Court decision in the Louisiana versus Calais case is that basically now Texas thinks they're going to get a free ride in the courts, even though they know they broke the law in their gerrymander. Now Florida has already passed their maps. We think there was collusion between the governor and the Supreme Court because he filed his maps and made the legislature vote on those maps the day the Supreme Court handed down the decision. And within 2 days, there were 5 southern states that started talking about basically destroying all of the gains and redistricting that had happened since the 1965 Voting Rights Act. I want to be clear, it could be catastrophic. We don't know what's going to happen in the next few months. By some counts, we could lose 20 Democratic seats in the South. Now, what is unknown about what can happen is one, will these governors and state legislatures do it and succeed at it, or will the people in those states, organize and say, no, we're not going to do that? We know that the Voting Rights Act is still there, even though the compliance got gutted. And so already the National Redistricting Committee and all the national democratic organizations and civil rights organizations are already preparing for lawsuits in all of those states. And, even though the bar for compliance with the Voting Rights Act has been lowered, we know that there's some folks that are going to do some stupid stuff out there, and that ultimately they're going to be held accountable by the courts. And then the kind of third piece of this is the timing. So multiple states already have primaries. Louisiana illegally this week paused their primary in the middle of early voting. That was illegal to redistrict. So we don't know what chaos is going to happen in the next few months, but what we do know is it's going to be wildly disruptive to this election. And that's just the reality of it. And we're living through it. It's messy. It's ugly. We don't know what's going to happen. So what can all of you do to help? Because I'm sure many of you are asking yourselves that. Get involved. If you have friends and family that live in states that are undertaking illegal gerrymandering, get involved with local organizations that are fighting that. Help support the National Democratic Redistricting nonprofit organization run by Eric Holder, which is the tip of the spear alongside Martha Elias in leading all of our national lawsuits against all of this illegal gerrymandering. But those are some of the things you can do. And at the local level, we have to make sure that we not only re-elect all of the Democratic Congress people to Congress who are going to fight this fight in Congress, but that we elect the county clerks in every single county, because that's where your vote actually gets counted, is by your county clerk. It is your county clerk who determines whether or not ultimately your vote counts. And I just got handed a note. Somebody with a white hoodie and a high flare is blocking the road. So that's you. Please unblock the road. And our state legislatures. And so supporting our state legislators here in New Mexico and in states where the stakes are very high is another really important action, because as you see, a lot of this action ultimately is it's going to affect the national map, but it's going to happen in state legislative bodies. And so that's one of the ways that you can get involved. Finally, the courts themselves. What I can say is that there are now hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits against this administration for all manner of illegal executive overreach, corruption, illegal firings, you name it. If you've got an issue, there's probably a lawsuit about it. And Now, all of that is very scary, I know, and a lot of it is out of our control. And so what I try to do in my congressional office every day, and as your member of Congress, is to try to focus on the things that I can do. And there is a remarkable amount of bipartisan work happening behind the scenes. Obviously, these guys are not holding the president accountable on the big issues of democracy and war, which is extremely problematic to say the least. But there is still a lot of bipartisanship happening around the budget. We've been able to get a lot of earmarked money for our communities. In New Mexico, we brought back hundreds of millions of dollars over the last several years for behavioral health, addiction recovery. We're helping to rebuild the pre-K school here in Ruidoso. We're helping to build the Head Start in Mescalero. We've been bringing home emergency response money for responding to the floods and the fires. And so there's still a lot of work going on behind the scenes that's still functional and operational. And so a lot of people ask me, how do you not give up hope when you see all this chaos going on? And I sort of see like the current moment that we're living in, and this is very apropos for all of you, is like living through a natural disaster. It's messy. It's terrifying. There is damage all around us. People are getting hurt. People are getting killed. Property is being destroyed, and our country is being torn apart. But are we going to get through this storm? We are going to get through this storm. And ultimately, we're going to have to clean it all up when we get through the other side. We're going to have to not only hold everyone accountable who broke the law and send them to jail, is my hope, but we are going to have to rebuild this country. We're going to have to rebuild our economy. We're going to have to rebuild the agencies that serve our communities. We're going to have to reimagine our policy and our politics, and we're going to have to rebuild our relationships with each other. Because I think when we come out the other side of this, part of what we'll see is that our entire country got hijacked by this moment. Think about your own relationships with people you love, friends, family members, who kind of like went down the rabbit hole and drank the Kool-Aid and you can't even have conversations with them. Part of our work in rebuilding our country is also going to have to be to rebuild our communities and to reinvest in each other. So as we're thinking about the midterms, what comes in the next few weeks, in the next few months, I got asked as I walked in here, are we going to have another election? Guess what? We have another election in less than a month. Yes. And that is the primary right here in New Mexico. And so one of the best things you can do for our democracy is to vote, check your registration, make a plan to vote. This is a very consequential primary here in New Mexico. I say this not to be partisan, but my candidate is Deb Holland, and I believe that she is absolutely the best candidate to put us on a trajectory to continue the historic work that we are already doing in New Mexico. Because here's what is happening in New Mexico, and I'll kind of leave it here on a hopeful note. New Mexico is literally leading the nation. Almost every single day I am in Congress, people ask me about what's happening. I know that we love to, we're humble people. We also like to beat up on ourselves and talk about how hard it is here and all the ways in which we're struggling, because it's true, our people struggle, our economy struggles here in these humble communities that we live in. But New Mexico has truly transformed not only the political and policy landscape inside our state,
the father is already down in Mexico.
Happening right now into what is happening with armed forces food rationing, being led by my colleague Sarah. And so we'll follow up with you specifically on the situation. There is a bipartisan investigation in Congress happening right now.
I've heard a lot said about the ships that are near Iran, about their rations being cut, but nothing about everybody else.
This is not in the Middle East.
He's in a group with other countries that are doing training exercises, in like Japan and Australia and the Philippines, and so they're going to different areas in there. He's not in Iran.
This is the first time I'm hearing this. I don't sit on the armed forces or any of the committees of jurisdiction that work on these issues, but I will call Sarah right after we leave here to talk to her about it. She's our lead on this issue. So, in terms of ICE enforcement and what to do if you know somebody who because